The Kenyan morning sun was already scorching the skin, and the ground under the park ranger David's feet felt as dry as the sky. The heat in the air shimmered over the savanna, distorting the sparse acacia trees on the horizon. This was Tsavo West National Park, a land of ochre vastness, inhabited by wildlife that at times seemed mythical. David, 50 years old, carried not only his service radio and rifle, but also the experience of 3 decades of patrolling. His eyes, hardened by time, had seen nature's beauty and cruelty in equal measure. On that day, cruelty seemed to be lurking. The silence was abnormal. There was no vibrant sound of birds, nor the distant cry of zebras, just the insistent buzz of flies and the crunch of his boots on the dead grass. David was following the tracks of a lioness, a trail he had been on for almost an hour. The marks, clear and fresh, told a story of desperation, a failed hunt, the trail of a starving mother. The lioness, a solitary female he knew by a scar on her ear, was in her usual territory, but the direction of her pawprints was erratic, a sign of exhaustion. His search led him to a small ravine with dark rocks. Upon arriving, he was met with a heart-breaking sight. The lioness, panting and thin, lay in the shade of a rock with wounded paws. Next to her, a sight that made him stop breathing. A cub, with its fragile body trembling with hunger. It was impossibly small, a bundle of tawny fur curled against its mother, whimpering weakly. The mother was too weak to even move her head. David knew the park's strict rules. Intervention was forbidden unless a life was in immediate danger. But what he saw was beyond a simple rulebook. It was a cry for help from a wild creature, a mother fighting a losing battle. He carefully placed his rifle on the ground, then cautiously walked a bit closer, holding out a canteen of water. The cub's eyes, clouded with weakness, barely registered his presence. The mother's gaze, however, was fixed on him, filled with a mix of suspicion and a flicker of hope. He couldn't leave them. He had to do something. This is a fictional story. If you enjoyed this first chapter, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories from the wild. David retreated a few steps, giving the animals some space. He knew that any sudden movement could provoke a defensive reaction from the lioness, even in her weakened state. He took a moment to consider his options. Direct contact was risky, and he didn't have any food with him suitable for a predator of that size. The nearest ranger station was a 45-minute drive away, but he couldn't leave them here, exposed to the elements and other predators. The cub's whimpers grew fainter, a sound that pierced his heart. He made a quick decision. He took the radio from his belt and called the nearest station, speaking in a low, calm voice to his partner, Joseph. "Joseph, I have a situation. A lioness and a cub, both in bad shape. They're in the ravine near the acacia grove. The mother is badly injured and the cub is starving. I need assistance and fast. Bring a small tranquilizer just in case, and some meat." Joseph's voice came back, firm and worried. "On my way, David. Hang in there." While he waited, David did what he could. He filled a shallow indentation in a rock with water from his canteen and placed it near the lioness's head. The mother watched him, but didn't react. Her trust in him was still fragile, but her thirst was stronger. She licked the water slowly, her tongue lapping it up with difficulty. David could see the life returning to her eyes, even if just a little. The cub, still nestled against her side, only moved its tiny head slightly. He sat on a rock about 50 feet away, his gaze fixed on the small family. The sun was getting higher, and the heat was becoming unbearable. The hours stretched on, and the silence was broken only by the chirping of insects and the distant cry of an eagle. David's patience was tested, but his resolve was unshakable. He had a duty to protect these animals, and that meant more than just chasing away poachers. It meant caring for them, understanding their struggles and sometimes breaking the rules to save a life. An hour later, the dust cloud from a Land Rover appeared on the horizon. Joseph arrived, his face serious, a cooler box in hand. He approached David cautiously, his eyes on the lioness. "Any trouble?" he whispered. David shook his head. "She's weak, but still alert. The cub is barely moving." Joseph nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. He carefully opened the cooler and took out a large piece of fresh meat. "We've found this. It's not much, but it's something." Together, they devised a plan. Joseph would stand watch from a distance with the tranquilizer dart ready, while David, the familiar face, would carefully try to get the meat closer. David moved slowly, placing the meat on the ground a few feet away from the lioness. She raised her head, her nostrils flaring at the scent of food. A low growl rumbled in her throat, a warning, but her eyes were pleading. She was torn between her primal instincts and the overwhelming need to feed her child. David retreated again, watching. The lioness, with an immense effort, pushed herself to her feet. She limped towards the meat, her wounded paws leaving a faint trail of blood. She ate quickly, devouring the food in a few bites, her hunger an uncontainable force. The cub, smelling the food, let out a weak whimper. Once she was finished, she returned to her cub, nudging it with her nose. David and Joseph held their breath. The lioness, in a surprising gesture, pushed a small piece of meat towards the cub with her paw, a piece she had saved. The cub nibbled on it, gaining a bit of strength. The rangers knew they had to be quick. With the lioness preoccupied with her cub, they took the opportunity to approach and examine her wounds. David carefully cleaned her paws and applied a disinfectant, while Joseph kept a close watch. They worked in tandem, a silent, focused team. The lioness watched them, her trust now evident in her weary eyes. She seemed to understand that these humans were there to help, not to harm. They had saved her life and the life of her cub. Remember to subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories like this. This story is a work of fiction. With the immediate danger averted, David and Joseph knew they couldn't leave the lioness and her cub in such a vulnerable state. The mother's injuries, while not life-threatening anymore, would hinder her ability to hunt effectively. The cub, though having had its first proper meal in days, was still frail and dependent. They decided to carefully help them reach a safer location, closer to a water source and with better cover. Using a thick canvas sheet they always carried for emergencies, they gently coaxed the lioness onto it. She was surprisingly compliant, perhaps understanding their intentions, or simply too weak to resist. The cub nestled close to her, seeking warmth and security. It took both rangers, with careful maneuvering, to lift the makeshift stretcher. The weight of the adult lioness was significant, and the terrain was uneven, making their progress slow and arduous under the relentless African sun. They carried them for nearly a kilometer, their muscles straining with each step, until they reached a small spring hidden amongst a cluster of rocks and dense bushes. It was a place David knew well, a secluded spot where animals often came to drink and rest undisturbed. They gently lowered the lioness onto the soft earth near the water's edge. The cub immediately began to suckle, a small but powerful sign of life. The mother lioness looked at David and Joseph, a soft rumble emanating from her chest. It wasn't a growl of threat, but something akin to gratitude. Her gaze lingered on them for a long moment, a silent acknowledgement of their help. David felt a profound connection with this wild creature, a bond forged in a moment of shared vulnerability. He knew the risks they had taken, the rules they had bent, but seeing the mother and cub together, safe and with a chance to survive, made it all worthwhile. For the next few days, David and Joseph made it their routine to check on the lioness and her cub. They brought fresh meat, leaving it a safe distance away, ensuring the mother didn't become dependent on them for food. They observed from afar, witnessing the slow but steady recovery of the small family. The lioness's wounds were healing, and she was regaining her strength. The cub was growing visibly stronger, its once frail body now showing the resilience of youth. David noticed the lioness becoming more protective. Her wariness towards them had returned, but it was a healthy caution, the instinct of a mother safeguarding her young. She would often keep a watchful eye on them as they left the meat, a low growl serving as a clear message to keep their distance. They respected her boundaries, knowing that their role was to give them a chance not to interfere with the natural order. One morning, as they approached their usual observation point, they saw something extraordinary. The lioness was teaching her cub to hunt. The small, wobbly cub was playfully pouncing on a fallen branch, mimicking its mother's movements. The lioness would gently guide it, nudging it with her paw, demonstrating the art of the stalk and the pounce. It was a private lesson in the harsh school of the wild, a testament to the enduring bond between mother and offspring. David and Joseph watched in awe, feeling privileged to witness such an intimate moment in the lives of these magnificent creatures. It was a reminder of the raw beauty and intricate web of life that thrived within the park's boundaries, a reminder of why their work was so important. They were not just guardians of the land, but also silent witnesses to the dramas of the wild, stories of survival, resilience, and the powerful force of maternal love. Weeks turned into months, and the little cub was no longer so little. It was now a playful, energetic youngster, its tawny coat blending perfectly with the savanna grasses. The bond between the mother and cub remained strong, an unbreakable connection forged in hardship and nurtured by survival. David and Joseph continued to monitor them from a distance, their hearts filled with a quiet satisfaction as they watched the family thrive. The lioness, whom David had nicknamed Survivor in his mind, was once again the formidable predator she was meant to be. Her limp was barely noticeable, and her eyes held the sharp intelligence of a seasoned hunter. The cub, now boisterous and curious, shadowed her every move, learning the skills necessary to survive in the wild. David had seen many lion families in his years as a ranger, but there was something special about this pair, a testament to the power of resilience and the kindness of strangers. One particularly dry season, when food was scarce, David and Joseph were on patrol when they spotted Survivor hunting near a watering hole. The hunt was unsuccessful, and the lioness returned to her cub empty-pawed. The cub, now old enough to understand hunger, nuzzled against its mother, a silent plea for food. David and Joseph exchanged a look. They knew they shouldn't interfere, but the sight of the hungry cub tugged at their heartstrings. Later that day, they left a small carcass of an antelope near the watering hole, far enough from the lioness to avoid direct interaction. They watched from a distance as Survivor approached cautiously, her nose twitching as she caught the scent. She surveyed her surroundings before allowing the cub to feed. It was a small act of kindness, a silent offering to a creature they had helped in its time of need. They knew the risks of habituation, but in this extreme circumstance, they felt it was the right thing to do. The bond between Survivor and her cub continued to deepen as the young lion grew older and more independent. The cub, now nearly the size of its mother, was starting to venture out on its own, exploring the boundaries of their territory. Survivor would watch from a distance, her gaze protective but also allowing her offspring to learn and grow. David and Joseph observed these developments with a sense of pride. They had witnessed the cub's first faltering steps, its first successful pounces, and now its gradual journey towards independence. It was a reminder of the cyclical nature of life in the wild, the constant struggle for survival, and the enduring power of family bonds. One afternoon while on patrol, David noticed a group of hyenas encroaching on Survivor's territory. The scavengers were bold, their numbers giving them confidence. David watched with concern as Survivor emerged from the bush, her fur bristling, a low growl rumbling in her chest. Her cub, hearing the commotion, quickly returned to her side. The confrontation was tense. The hyenas, though numerous, were hesitant to challenge a fully grown lioness protecting her young. Survivor stood her ground, her eyes blazing, her teeth bared in a silent threat. The cub stood beside her, mimicking her posture, a small but brave display of solidarity. After a tense standoff, the hyenas, realizing they were outmatched, eventually retreated. David and Joseph breathed a sigh of relief. Survivor had proven once again her strength and her unwavering devotion to her cub. As the young lion approached adulthood, the dynamics within the family began to shift. The cub, now strong and capable, was testing its boundaries, engaging in mock fights with its mother, honing its hunting skills. Survivor, while still protective, was gradually allowing her offspring more freedom, preparing it for the day it would eventually establish its own territory. David and Joseph understood this natural progression. They had seen it countless times before. The bond between a mother lion and her offspring is intense but temporary, a necessary stage in the cycle of life. They knew that soon the young lion would venture off on its own, driven by instinct to find its own place in the savanna. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, David and Joseph observed Survivor and her now nearly adult cub resting near their favorite watering hole. The two lions lay side by side, their bodies touching, a picture of peaceful coexistence. The cub nuzzled its mother affectionately, a gesture of love and respect. David felt a pang of melancholy. He knew this scene wouldn't last forever. Soon the young lion would leave, and Survivor would once again roam her territory alone. But he also felt a sense of fulfillment. They had played a small part in this lion's life, giving it a chance when it was at its weakest. They had witnessed its growth, its resilience, and the enduring love of its mother. The inevitable day arrived when the young lion ventured out on its own. David and Joseph, during one of their routine patrols, noticed that Survivor was alone. There was no sign of her cub. They scanned the horizon, their binoculars searching the vast expanse of the savanna, but the young lion was nowhere to be seen. They knew this was a natural part of life, but a sense of emptiness filled them. They had grown accustomed to seeing the pair together, their bond a heartwarming constant in the wild landscape. They hoped the young lion would be successful, that it would find its own territory and thrive. Days turned into weeks, and Survivor continued her solitary existence. She roamed her familiar territory, her powerful presence a testament to her resilience. David and Joseph occasionally saw her, always from a respectful distance, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Then, one morning, as they approached the watering hole, they saw something that made them stop in their tracks. Survivor was there, and beside her was another lion. It wasn't her cub, but a magnificent male, his mane thick and dark, a sign of strength and maturity. They watched as the two lions interacted, a cautious dance of curiosity and perhaps a budding connection. David and Joseph exchanged a knowing glance. Life in the savanna continued, new chapters unfolding with each sunrise. Survivor, having raised her cub, was now potentially embarking on a new phase of her life. The cycle of life, with its joys and separations, continued its timeless rhythm. Months passed and the male lion remained in Survivor's territory. David and Joseph observed them occasionally, noticing the growing bond between the pair. And then, one day, they saw something that brought a smile to their faces. Survivor was no longer alone, and neither was the male. Following closely behind them were two small, wobbly cubs. The sight filled David with a profound sense of joy. He had witnessed the beginning of one life, and now he was witnessing the continuation of the cycle. Survivor, the small, weak lioness they had found years ago, had not only survived, but had thrived, becoming a mother once again. He remembered the day he had found her and her first cub in the ravine, the feeling of helplessness and the decision to break the rules to give them a chance. Looking at the new family now, he knew they had made the right choice. The wild was a harsh and unforgiving place, but it was also a place of incredible resilience and the enduring power of life. As the sun set over the Kenyan savanna, casting a golden glow on the small lion family, David and Joseph watched from a distance. They were just two guardians of this vast and precious land, witnesses to the extraordinary dramas that unfolded within its borders. The story of Survivor and her cubs was a reminder that even in the face of adversity, hope and new beginnings were always possible. And in the heart of the wild, the cycle of life, with all its challenges and triumphs, would continue its timeless journey.